Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
It seems like a lot of you are really interested in figuring out this whole investing thing, especially with all the craziness in the market right now.
Yeah, lots of questions about that for sure.
Exactly. And you sent over this fascinating discussion with Nick Maggiulli, he wrote, Just Keep Vying, from the Bogleheads conference back in 2022.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
So we thought, let's dig into that and see if his advice still makes sense today, with inflation and the market being all over the place.
Well, he definitely starts off addressing the elephant in the room, like everyone's a little on edge with the market dipping.
Right. It's down, what, like 24% right now?
Yeah, something like that.
So should we be worried?
Well, Maggiulli, he actually went back and looked at how the market performed after different size drops.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he found that for U.S. stocks, at least, the returns don't really start, bouncing back strongly until you hit like a 40% drop or more.
A 40% drop.
He actually said, and I'm paraphrasing here, more pain is possible when you're down only a little, but most of the damage is usually done after a big fall.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, so think of it this way. If a tree loses a few branches, it can probably keep growing just fine, but if the whole trunk breaks, it's got to start from scratch to really thrive again.
Okay, that makes sense. So like a small dip, even though it feels tempting to buy,
Yeah.
that might not be the best time.
Exactly.
All right. But what about inflation? That's the other thing everyone keeps bringing up.
Yeah, for sure. Maggiulli looked into that too. He looked at how different kinds of assets performed when inflation was high, like above 4%. And he went all the way back to the mid-1970s for this.
Wow, that's going way back.
Yeah, and consistent. You know what came out on top? U.S. stocks, U.S. REITs, and international stocks.
Really, even with prices going up, those investments still did well.
They did. And he even pointed out, just as a really interesting example, that the U.S. market, even though it lost almost half its value between 73 and 74 because of inflation, it bounced back in 75 with a 28% return.
Wow, 28%.
So it really shows that while inflation can be a pain in the short term, in the long run, it doesn't mean the end of gains.
I like that. That's a good point. It's kind of a good reminder to stay focused on the long game.
Absolutely.
So now Maggiulli also had this idea, it's called the save, invest continuum. And he even said something kind of provocative. Saving is for the poor, investing is for the rich.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. He got a lot of heat for that one.
Yeah, it sounds a little harsh, but I think he was trying to make a point.
He was. He clarified later, it wasn't about dismissing saving altogether. It was more about where you should focus your energy depending on where you are financially.
Okay, so it's not that one is better than the other. It's just what makes more of an impact at different points in your life.
Yeah, exactly. And he used himself as an example. Like when he was 23, he was saving around $10,000 a year, which is pretty impressive.
That's a lot for a 23-year-old.
Right, but his investments were only earning him like $100.
Oh, wow. So at that point, focusing on saving and making more money was way more important than obsessing over investments.
Exactly. Early on, it's all about maximizing that saving power.
So how do you know when to shift that focus? When does investing become the bigger thing?
He recommends asking yourself two questions. How much can you realistically save in the next year? And then how much could your investments realistically earn in that same year?
Okay, so whichever one is bigger.
That's where you put your attention.
Okay, I like that. That's a good way to kind of figure out where you stand.
It's a simple framework, but it works. It is. And it's funny because he actually dives into this whole 401k thing.
Oh, yeah. 401ks, everyone's got advice on those.
Right. And he's got a little bit of kind of a controversial take on it.
Oh, is he going to tell me I shouldn't max it out?
Well, he's not saying they're bad or anything. It's more about, he raises some questions, especially about contributions above and beyond, what your employer matches.
Okay, so always get that free money.
Absolutely. Always grab that.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it gets a little murky.
So what's the issue with going above and beyond?
Well, he looked at the numbers and found that the after-tax benefit of maxing out like a Roth 401k compared to just investing in a taxable brokerage account, it's actually pretty small.
Like how small are we talking?
Like 70, 80 basis points, something like that.
Okay, for those who don't know, what's a basis point?
Oh, right. Yeah, good point. A basis point is just a fancy way of saying 0.01%.
So we're talking less than 1% difference.
Yeah, and that's before fees.
Oh, right. Fees. Always got to factor those in.
He pointed out that the average 401k has fees around, 0.40%, which is 40 basis points.
So it could basically wipe out that benefit or even make it negative.
Exactly. And so his whole thing is, is it worth it? Sacrificing that flexibility for such a small gain.
That's a good question to ask yourself. Like, do you need that money for something else, like a house down payment? Are the fees super high in your plan?
Yeah, it's all about making that, informed decision.
Right, making it personal.
He also brought up the point, for some people, that automatic deduction from their paycheck, that's really
Oh,
helpful.
yeah, the set it and forget it method.
Right. If you struggle with saving consistently, like that forced savings can be a lifesaver.
Pay yourself first.
Yeah, but if you're already good at saving on your own, that flexibility might be more valuable.
Right, it depends on your personality.
So, back to the challenging conventions thing, he had this take on asset location, which is basically deciding where to put your different investments, which accounts to use.
Oh, yeah, that's always a tricky one.
And this one really kind of flips the script.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
He suggested putting your growth assets, like stocks, in tax-advantaged accounts, your 401ks, IRAs, and then keeping your, lower growth stuff like bonds in taxable accounts.
That's kind of the opposite of what I've always heard.
It used to be the standard advice because back when bond yields were higher, it made sense to shield that income from taxes.
Right, yeah.
But today, growth is the name of the game.
Got to make that money work for you.
And tax-advantaged accounts let your growth investments compound without being taxed along the way.
Like a little greenhouse for your money.
Exactly. And he mentioned he keeps his asset allocation the same across all his accounts.
Oh, that's interesting. So like same percentages of stocks and bonds everywhere.
Yeah, keeps things simple, easy to rebalance.
I like that. Streamlined.
And, for someone who's all about data and evidence-based investing, he admitted to having a little fun money allocation.
Oh, really? Even he's got a little YOLO in him.
He called it his way of scratching the itch to speculate about 10–15% for things like art and even crypto.
So like a little playground for riskier stuff without messing up the main portfolio.
Exactly. And he's not immune to emotions either.
Oh, I was going to say no one's perfect.
He told a story about selling half his Bitcoin at $52,000.
Oof. I bet he's kicking himself now.
He got a lot of criticism for not holding longer, but even the data-driven experts, they feel the FOMO.
It's human nature.
It is. And speaking of emotions, he also talked about connecting with your future self.
Like visualizing who you want to be.
Yeah, he mentioned some research, I think it's by Hal Hirschfield, where they showed people age-progressed photos of themselves.
Oh, wow. That would be trippy.
It made them more likely to save for retirement.
Like you're literally facing the future you.
Right, and he believes that connection is one of the most powerful motivators for financial success.
So like picture your dream retirement. What are you doing? Where are you living?
Yeah, and that kind of leads into one of the biggest fears people have about retirement, which is outliving their money.
That's the classic, bag lady scenario.
But he had a surprisingly optimistic view on this.
Really, even with all the doom and gloom out there.
He argued it's not as common as people think, especially among, the Boglehead crowd.
They tend to be pretty savvy.
He thinks people naturally adjust their spending in retirement, and most don't even touch their principal.
So they're living off the income their investments generate?
Or reinvesting those RMDs, those required minimum distributions from their retirement accounts.
Right. The government's like, hey, you saved all this. Time to start using it.
Exactly. And he even kind of debunked the myth of Social Security running out.
Oh, that's a big one.
He believes it'll be there in some form, even if the benefits are smaller.
Hopefully by then we'll have figured out, how to fix that.
He brought up a simulation of a classic 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds.
Yeah, that's like the textbook allocation.
And with a 4% withdrawal rate, historically, this type of portfolio has been more likely to quadruple your money over 30 years than to dip below your starting principal.
Wow, that's pretty reassuring.
It shows that with a solid plan, you're probably going to be just fine.
Fingers crossed, right?
And, this was actually part of a live event, so the audience had some really great questions for him.
Oh, yeah. Audience Q&A. Always the best part.
They really pushed him to expand on some of his ideas, especially that whole not maxing out your 401k thing.
Oh, yeah. I bet people had thoughts on that.
One person brought up the point we talked about earlier, that for some, that automatic deduction is the only way they'll save.
Yeah, it takes the willpower out of the equation.
And he agreed. For those folks, it's totally worth it. But he also reiterated, if you're already disciplined, that flexibility might be better.
Having more control of your money?
Someone else pointed out, you can roll over your 401k into an IRA when you leave a job.
Oh, yeah, you can get more options, lower fees, potentially.
He highlighted the importance of understanding those fees.
Fees can really sneak up on you.
Especially 401ks, he mentioned. If your fees are over 1%, reconsider.
That's a big chunk being eaten away.
It's true. Every dollar in fees is a dollar not working for you.
Gotta watch out for those hidden costs.
And it's not just 401k, it's any investment, IRAs, brokerage accounts. Always do your research.
Due diligence, that's the key.
Another interesting question was about, trend following versus buy and hold.
Oh, yeah, that's a big debate in investing.
Trend following, it's all about riding the waves, buying when prices are up, selling when they're down.
It's kind of stressful.
He admitted it's tough to do well. He even shared a story about a famous trend follower who missed out on a big chunk of the market rally in 2020.
Oh, no, because they sold at the bottom.
Exactly. By the time they bought back in, the market had recovered.
Missed the whole boat.
It can be emotionally draining, too.
Constantly second-guessing yourself.
If you do dabble, keep it to a smaller portion of your portfolio.
Don't bet the farm on it.
Someone else asked about resources for understanding long-term capital market expectations.
Basically, how much your investments can realistically grow over time.
Yeah, and he stressed being conservative with your assumptions.
Don't get too greedy with those projections.
He personally uses a 4% real return for his globally diversified portfolio.
So stocks, bonds, REITs, that kind of thing.
The income-producing asset?
It's better to be pleasantly surprised than disappointed.
Absolutely. And, that really aligns with the Boglehead philosophy. Focus on what you can control.
Savings rate, investment costs, asset allocation.
Don't try to time the market.
Hmm.
Just keep investing consistently.
Let time do its thing.
Now, one audience member shared a really interesting story. They talked about being super disciplined, saving and investing early on, but made some costly mistakes.
Oh, like what kind of mistakes?
Investing in high-fee, actively managed funds, those complex financial products.
Those can be tricky.
It's a good reminder that even if you're saving right, you got to be careful where you invest.
Got to learn the basics, understand fees, diversification.
It's an investment in yourself.
Knowledge is power.
Now, here's the question that really stood out. Someone asked, what's the biggest mistake you're afraid we would make? The people in this room, who already know a fair bit about investing.
Ooh, that's a good one. What did he say?
He surprised everyone. He said, it's not an investment mistake. It's not how much you're saving. It's probably your spending.
Whoa, really? He thinks the biggest risk isn't losing money, it's over-accumulating it.
He even suggested a book for this audience, Die with Zero.
He's not saying blow it all, but it's about finding that balance.
It's a good reminder to think about what you're saving for and actually enjoy life along the way.
Live a little, right?
And that brought him to his final recommendation. He suggested checking out a financial content creator named Katie. She runs Money with Katie.
Oh, yeah, I've seen her stuff. She's great.
He highlighted her approach of framing retirement savings in terms of monthly income.
So, like, how much you'll actually have to spend each month?
Yeah, it's the same concept we talked about, that every $30,000 you save is roughly $100 per month in retirement income if you're using a 4% withdrawal rate.
That makes it so much more tangible, like a paycheck from your future self.
Exactly. Helps you figure out how much you need to save to live the life you want.
So, big takeaways here. Even with all the uncertainty, the fundamentals still hold true.
Invest consistently, diversify, keep those costs low.
Don't get distracted by the day-to-day noise. Focus on the long game.
But maybe the biggest risk isn't running out of money. It's running out of time to enjoy it.
What would you do today if you knew your financial future was secure?
Travel more, spend time with loved ones, pursue that passion project.
Those are the questions that matter.
And maybe finding those answers will help you make even smarter financial decisions today.
It's not just about building wealth. It's about building a life you love.
And that wraps up our deep dive into Just Keep Buying with Nick Maggiulli.
Hopefully you had some valuable insights and maybe even a little inspiration.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, keep asking those big questions.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, what are all those sacrifices for?
Right. Are we just working and saving for some distant future that we might not even get to enjoy?
It really makes you think about, living in the now. Exactly. And, speaking of living in the now, he actually brought up this interesting point about spending.
Oh, yeah. He suggested checking out this financial content creator named Katie. She runs Money with Katie.
Oh, I've heard of her. She's got some great stuff.
Yeah, and Maggiulli really liked her approach of framing retirement savings in terms of monthly income.
So, like, instead of thinking about, $1 million in your account.
Right. It's about how much you'll actually have to spend each month.
Makes it more real, like a paycheck from your future self?
It is, and it ties back to that concept we were talking about, that every $30,000 you save is roughly $100 a month in retirement income if you're using that 4% withdrawal rate.
It's a much more tangible way to visualize your goals, instead of just these big, scary numbers.
Yeah, it helps you break it down, figure out how much you really need to save to live the life you want.
So I guess the big takeaway here is even with all the crazy stuff happening in the market, those fundamentals, they still matter.
Absolutely. Invest consistently, diversify that portfolio, keep those costs low.
Don't get caught up in all the daily ups and downs. Stay focused on the long game.
But maybe, just maybe, the biggest risk isn't running out of money.
It's running out of time to enjoy the life you've built.
It's a good point. Think about it. What would you do today if you knew, your financial future was set?
Would you travel more? Spend more time with family and friends? Finally start that business you've always dreamed of?
It really makes you think about what's important.
And maybe finding those answers, that'll actually help you make even better financial decisions right now.
Because at the end of the day, it's not just about building wealth. It's about building a life you love.
Well said. And that wraps up our deep dive into Just Keep Buying with Nick Maggiulli.
Hopefully everyone got some food for thought, maybe some new ideas to explore.
Until next time, keep learning, keep investing, and most importantly, keep living your life to the fullest.
And remember, the best investment you can make is in yourself.